Most women don't lose men, they lose themselves, trying to keep one. And it usually doesn't happen in a dramatic moment. It happens in small trades you barely notice. You laugh when something stings. You soften a boundary so he won't pull away. You call it being understanding. You call it being mature. You call it love. But if you're honest, your body knows the price. This video isn't dating advice. It's self-betrayal prevention, because there's a kind of good woman conditioning that teaches you to measure your worth by how easy you are to keep, how flexible you are, how little you require. And if you've lived inside that role long enough, you start confusing connection with compliance. By the end of this video, you'll know which good intentions are actually slow self-abandonment, things that look like love on the surface, but drain you underneath. So let me ask you gently, if you've ever stayed quiet to keep the peace, type one word in the comments, enough, and stay with me, because we're starting with the first trap, the one that looks like love, until you notice how small you feel inside it. Thing number one, never trade your boundary for belonging. You can tell a lot about a man by what happens when you say no. Not a loud no, not a dramatic no, just a simple, calm boundary. Not yet. I'm not comfortable with that. I need more time. And suddenly the room changes. He might not raise his voice. He might even smile, but something in his tone shifts, like your boundary is a problem to solve instead of a truth to respect. He starts negotiating. He starts treating your no like a misunderstanding you need to be talked out of. This is where a lot of women get pulled into the oldest bargain in the book. If I make it easier for him, I won't be left. So you start editing. You soften the edge of your boundary until it barely exists. You tell yourself you're being flexible. You tell yourself you're being fair. And if you grew up in a home where love came with conditions, where difficult meant unlovable, this will feel almost automatic. One of the biggest boundaries that we will hold in relationships is when we sleep with somebody else, when we're going to have sex with them. If you hold true to your boundaries, something magical happens. So many clients that came into my coaching, having not honored their boundaries, slept with a guy, then he doesn't call her back or he ghosts her. And the sting of having not only been rejected, but also degraded their own boundaries or not held true to their own boundaries, and their own self-esteem drops. Contrary, when that client then stays true to her own boundaries and says, hey, I want this level of connection before I sleep with somebody. And then the guy ghosts her, because some guys do, right? They're only interested in just having sex, so they're not going to stick around. What happens is amazing. Yes, she still feels the sting of being rejected, but her own self-esteem, her own self-confidence, her self-worth increases because she stayed true to her boundaries. She didn't have to waste months with the wrong guy before she sent him packing and making room for the right guy. When you trade your boundary for belonging, you don't just lose a rule, you lose trust with yourself. Your nervous system notices. It logs the moment you abandon your own signal. And even if the relationship continues, something inside you gets quieter. Not because you're calm, because you're disappearing. Jung would call this a split. The part of you that wants connection starts performing. The part of you that knows the truth retreats into the shadow. That shadow doesn't go away. It waits. It shows up later as resentment, numbness, sudden exhaustion around him for no reason. Now, this doesn't mean boundaries make you cold. It means boundaries make you real. A man who is safe won't require a presentation to accept your limits. He won't act like your pace is an inconvenience, because he's not dating you to access you. He's dating you to know you. So here's a simple check. When you hold your boundary, do you feel more grounded afterward? Or do you feel like you need to apologize for having one? Because the man who can't honor your boundary up front isn't built for the kind of love you're trying to create. Not because he's evil, because he's incompatible with a woman who belongs to herself. And that's the point. You are not here to be chosen at the cost of your truth. You're here to be met. If this hit you, comment one word, clean. Now, let's go to the second thing you never do for a man. It's quieter than you think, and it's how women slowly lose their whole lives without noticing. Thing number 2, never make him the center of your life. There's a moment that looks harmless on the outside. You cancel something small, a walk, a coffee date with a friend you haven't seen in weeks, not because he demanded it. He didn't even ask directly. He just suggested, "Come over." And you felt that familiar pull to make yourself available fast, so the connection doesn't cool. At first, it feels like romance, like priority, like you're choosing love. But if you stay honest, it's something else. It's the slow relocation of your life. One day you realize your weekends are built around his schedule. Your phone is always within reach. Your plans stay flexible, just in case. The things that used to refill you, your people, your hobbies, your little rituals, start to feel optional. And without meaning to, you become a satellite. Your whole system starts orbiting him. Jung would call this an identification. You don't just like him. You start merging your sense of self with the relationship. And if you've ever been rewarded for being the easy woman, the one who doesn't ask for much, this can feel like security, but it's not security. It's self-erasure with good lighting. Because here's what happens when a man becomes your center. You start measuring your worth by his attention. You start treating your own life like background noise. And then when he pulls back, whether it's avoidance, immaturity, stress, or simply a lack of investment, it doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes you. It feels like the ground moved because you built your foundation on someone else's availability. This isn't about being independent for the sake of pride. It's about having an inner life that remains yours. The healthiest relationships don't require you to disappear. They make room for you. Your friendships don't become extra. Your passions don't become childish. Your solitude doesn't become suspicious. A good man doesn't want you to be smaller so he can feel bigger. He wants to meet you where you're alive. So here's the real question. When you're with him, do you still recognize yourself? Not just the version of you that's lovable and agreeable, the you that laughs the way you laugh with your friends, the you that has a life even when no one is watching. Because if you have to abandon your world to keep his attention, you're not building love, you're buying closeness with your own identity. If you've ever felt this, if you've ever watched your life get quiet to keep a relationship loud, comment one word, return. Now let's move to the third thing you never do. It's the one that turns anxiety into a habit and calls it devotion. Thing number 3, never chase him when he pulls away. When he pulls away, your body will want to close the distance, not because you're desperate, because your nervous system learned a long time ago that distance can mean danger. Distance can mean you did something wrong and you need to fix it quickly before the door shuts, so you reach. You send a text that sounds casual but isn't. Hey, you okay? Did I do something? And if he stays cold, you reach again. You start explaining yourself. You start offering reassurance he hasn't earned. You start turning yourself into a bridge, trying to reconnect the two of you by carrying the whole thing on your back. That's chasing. And chasing doesn't create closeness. It creates a power imbalance. Because now he has something that your body thinks it needs, his attention. And even if he's not consciously manipulating you, the dynamic still forms. You become the one trying to prove your worth. He becomes the one deciding whether you're worth showing up for. But here's the truth most people avoid. A healthy man uses space to reflect, not to disappear. And you don't have to chase reflection. Reflection returns on its own. So when he pulls back, the real move isn't to panic. It's to become still, not as a tactic, as a form of self-respect. You send One clear message if you need to. You don't flood him with paragraphs, you don't run after crumbs, you watch what he does in the quiet, because the quiet is where character shows up. Does he come back with clarity? Does he communicate like an adult? Or does he enjoy the silence because it gives him control? The moment you stop chasing, reality starts speaking. And it can be painful because it reveals things you've been able to avoid by staying in motion. But it's also relief, because once you see what someone does when you stop doing the work for them, you stop confusing effort with love. This isn't about playing hard to get, it's about refusing to abandon yourself just because someone else became unavailable. So if you've ever felt that urge to close the gap, if you've ever watched yourself shrink into anxiety while trying to keep a connection alive, comment one word: wait. Because in that pause, you'll start to notice something. Sometimes the man you're chasing isn't the prize. Sometimes the prize is your own peace returning the moment you stop running. Now, the fourth thing you never do for a man is quieter than chasing, but it's the one that traps good women for years. Thing number 4, never try to fix him or date his potential. There's a kind of hope that feels like love. You meet a man who isn't cruel. He isn't obvious danger. He might even be sweet in the beginning. But something is unfinished in him, emotionally, practically, sometimes morally. And instead of listening to that, you start building a story. He's had a hard life. He would be amazing if someone believed in him. That story can feel noble. It can make you feel patient, wise, chosen, like you're seeing a hidden version of him no one else sees. But Jung would call this projection. You're not relating to who he is. You're relating to an image, a future version, a possibility. And here's the quiet danger. You start dating the man he could become while your nervous system lives with the man he is right now. This is how fixing begins. You suggest books, you send podcasts, you try to help him grow. You become a translator for his emotions, a coach for his maturity, a buffer between him and the consequences of his behavior. It doesn't feel like control, it feels like care, but over time it turns the relationship into a project. And projects don't hold intimacy for long. They hold responsibility, they hold tension, they hold a quiet resentment that you can't name because you're the one who volunteered to do the work. Here's the part many women don't want to face. If you have to fix him to be able to love him, your love is already paying a fee, and the fee is your energy. You are spending your life force trying to produce a partner who can meet you, instead of choosing someone who already can. This doesn't mean people can't grow, they can, but growth that comes from being pushed, persuaded, or managed isn't growth, it's compliance, and compliance collapses the moment you stop managing. Real growth is self-directed, it has weight to it, it shows up without you having to beg for consistency. So let this be a simple question you ask yourself without shame. Am I with him because of who he is, or because of what I keep hoping he'll become? Because if the relationship only works when you do the emotional labor for two, it isn't partnership. It's self-abandonment dressed up as devotion. And the saddest part is you can love him deeply and still be wrong about what he's capable of giving you. If this sounds familiar, if you've ever felt yourself living inside a future that never arrived, comment one word: real. Now the last one is the most common trap for heart-centered women. It looks generous, it sounds mature, but it quietly teaches men to take without earning. Thing number 5. Never overinvest to prove you're worthy. Overinvesting rarely feels like a mistake while you're doing it. It feels like love with initiative. You're the one planning the dates because you don't want to be difficult. You're the one checking in because you're thoughtful. You're the one driving across town adjusting your schedule, making space in your life. You tell yourself you're just a giver. You tell yourself you're just excited. You tell yourself it's normal to want to show someone how much you care. But Jung would ask a sharper question. What are you trying to secure with all that effort? Because for a lot of women, over-investing isn't romance. It's a strategy the psyche learned early. If I give enough, I will be chosen. That strategy might have started in childhood, being the helpful one, the mature one, the one who makes life easier, so love doesn't leave. And later, it turns into dating behavior that looks high value on the surface, but feels quietly anxious underneath. Here's how you can tell it's over-investing. You're doing more than the relationship can hold. You are offering loyalty before you've seen integrity. You are offering access before you've seen responsibility. You are offering your whole heart while the other person is still deciding whether they like the job. And when you lead like that, two things happen. First, you start teaching him that effort isn't required. You teach him that closeness arrives whether he shows up or not. And if he's healthy, he may feel uncomfortable, even guilty, because he can sense the imbalance. But if he's avoidant, entitled, or emotionally lazy, he will sink into it like it's furniture. Second, your body begins to keep score, not because you're petty, because your psyche is trying to protect you. It notices that you're pouring into a container that isn't pouring back. It begins to generate resentment as an alarm system, and then you feel ashamed for resenting because you were the one who offered. So you push the resentment down and call it love again. This is how women end up exhausted in relationships that look fine from the outside. Overinvesting is not the same as being loving. Love is mutual responsiveness over time. Love has pacing. Love has reciprocity. Love doesn't require you to audition. A secure connection doesn't ask you to chase, prove, overfunction, and then call that devotion. It lets you relax into your own life while the bond forms naturally. Let him show whether he's consistent without you doing the work for him. Let him earn access slowly in a way your nervous system can trust. This isn't about playing games. It's about staying loyal to yourself while you're getting to know someone, because the woman who overinvests is often not too much. She's just trying to make sure she won't be left again. If you take nothing else from this, let it be this. These 5 things were never about controlling men or doing dating right. They were about noticing the quiet moments where you leave yourself in order to keep a connection alive. The moment you soften a boundary to belong, the moment you make someone the center of your life, the moment you chase clarity that isn't being offered, the moment you try to fix what isn't yours to carry, the moment you overgive, hoping effort will turn into security. That's the checklist, not to judge yourself, to recognize patterns, because the shift doesn't happen when you become colder. It happens when you become more honest about the cost. And once you see that cost clearly, you stop paying it automatically. Jung believed that healing isn't about becoming better, it's about becoming whole. And wholeness begins the moment you stop negotiating with your own inner voice. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Which one of these have you done not because you're weak, but because you were trying to stay loved? Sit with that. You don't need to answer out loud. And if you're learning how to build relationships without losing yourself, stay here. The next video goes deeper into how to recognize emotional safety before your heart gets involved.